Okay, today we're going to be learning Chagigah Daf Kaf Bet. Okay, today's daf is sponsored by Michelle Lewis in honor of the birth of her first grandchild, Neria Shlomo. Mazel tov to his parents, Alex and Chaim Lewis. May you merit to bring him up to a life of Torah, Chuppah, and Ma'asim Tovim. Today's daf is also sponsored by Manny and Marsha Wasserman in honor of their son Noam and the birthday of their first grandchild, Talia. Thank you to my son Noam, who encourages me to continue learning, and to my amazing husband Manny, who engages in discussions with me about the daf, and to the fabulous team at Hadran, who have changed my life. Thank you. Okay, we're going to get started. Quick announcement about the Siyum. So the Siyum registration should be up later today. There's a bit of a different program than usual. We're going to have a lot more speakers, much shorter speeches, to kind of go back and have some of the speakers that we've been learning together with throughout Seder Moed. So the program will go up later today, and we're very excited. Hope you all join on Tuesday evening, 8:30 Israel time. Maybe it's morning by you, afternoon, middle of the night, whatever works. So we hope to see you all there. And again, we have the Hebrew going around the country in Israel. Also, there's a few communities in America that are doing Siyumim. If you're part of our WhatsApp groups, so you can get updated there. We have WhatsApp groups by geographical location. If you're not part of them, you can join them. There's a tab on the website called Communities. You can join a local community and be updated on information going on there. So not only in Israel, but there are events going on in different places as well. Okay, starting with our bit complicated daf, at least parts of it are complicated. So just to review, our first case in the Mishnah that we had was a kli b'toch kli. Again, we have a list of items that truma, when it comes to truma, it is not an issue. And when it comes to kodesh, it is an issue. So now we're going to say that the first one, Ein madbilin kelim betoch kelim, right? A vessel inside another vessel. When it comes to kodesh, it cannot be done. Why? We had two reasons. Rabbi Ela said we're worried about a chatzitza because it's heavy. It might weigh down, and then they'll be attached, and the water won't get all around. According to Rava, the issue is that we're worried that if we allow that, when it comes to a kli with a very narrow opening, and you'll put needles in it, and you'll think that works, and you need a certain amount of, the amount of 2 fingers that can twist around inside the space in order to connect water from, for example, one mikveh to another. We talked about that yesterday, right? A kosher mikveh to a non-kosher mikveh, which can basically make the non-kosher mikveh kosher if it's connected, and that's how they do piping in mikvaot. So that's the second reason. So now we want to know, we're on line number 6 now in our Gemara. What's the halachic difference between the two? They always love asking that question. If you have a very wide vessel, and in that is another vessel, well, it's so far from the width of 2 fingers that you don't have to worry that if we allow that, we're talking about a very large basket, which has a very wide opening. You clearly don't have to worry about someone saying, oh, well, maybe if I keep my needles in a very narrow open thing, and I'll think I can do that. Of course, you're not going to think that. So let's read it inside. If you're going to be like Rabbi Ela and you think that it's a chatzitza issue, well, that's going to be a chatzitza issue. It doesn't matter how wide the opening is. Still, the weight of the vessel might weigh down on the other one, and the water won't get all around the inner vessel, and it'll be a problem. But note, if you're worried that you're going to put these needles inside and in this very narrow opening of a vessel, and that for sure isn't going to work, then we're not worried about you confusing these halachot if we allow you to do it in this big wide vessel. And in fact, Azda Rava L'Ta'ameh, Rava actually fits in, meaning he says he's consistent within his approach. Somewhere else he talks about this, and he says exactly that it's not a problem. Okay, let's read it. If you fill them up, this wide utensil, you fill it up with another utensil, and you put it in the mikveh, it's fine. It works, tehorim. So there you have it exactly. He says this exact thing. Now the Gemara is just continuing with Rava. We're now off on a total tangent. It's because we brought Rava here. We're bringing the whole statement that he said. He said another halacha about a salvad gargutne. It's a little connected, but not really connected. Mikveh shechilko v'salv gargutni. Okay, what does this mean? You have a mikveh. It's a small mikveh. You have to imagine a small mikveh, otherwise it doesn't make sense, with a huge vessel. The vessel is the length, let's say, or the width, it doesn't really matter which one, of the mikveh. Okay, so it fills from one wall to another. Okay, it doesn't fill the entire mikveh, but it basically, in filling it, if you put it in the center of the mikveh, let's say, you split the mikveh in half. You separate the waters because the waters can't fully get through because it's a big vessel that's blocking the entire passageway from, let's say, the right side to the left side. If you do that and you stick that in the middle there, so, and let's say your mikveh had 40 se'ah, or even 50, let's say, remember the minimum is 40. Let's say you have 50. So you now have, and let's say it's right in the center. You now have one side of the mikveh with 25 se'ah and one side with 25 se'ah. Well, each side is not a kosher mikveh. The question is, are the waters considered combined as one? Because we have this barrier, but it's not exactly a wall. It's a basket. We know baskets are usually made of wicker or reeds or something like that. And the water can somewhat get through, somewhat, right? Not fully. So it's sort of a wall, it's sort of not. So the question is, what's the halacha? So again, this has nothing really to do with our topic, except it has to do with the salad garguni and it has to do with a mikveh, okay? But our topic was a toveling one. This isn't toveling it. This is, can it be a separation? So if you have, again, mikveh shechilko, you split it in half, bisal v'gargutni, but you get the sense of how big this sal and gargutni is. Hatovel sham lo altalo tefillah. If you go in the mikveh there, it doesn't work. Or you put a kli in the mikveh, it doesn't work. How do we know this? Because ara, the ground in and of itself, kula chilchule mechalchela. When you have the ground, right, you go to the beach, right, the sand, okay, you have the water permeates every part of the ground. Now, if I have a mikveh that's dug into the ground, and I have one mikveh and another mikveh, and in between is dirt from the ground, and this one has 25 and that one has 25, neither is a kosher mikveh. Even though theoretically you could say, well, the water can really somewhat get through the dirt there because it's absorbs water and the water can move around. So since that's even more permeable than it can permeate much better than this basket. This basket, there's some holes in it, but part of it is solid and water can't get through. So therefore, if the ground itself doesn't work to connect mikvaot, then certainly this basket is not going to work. You basically need 40 se'ah in one place, and this works as a barrier, and it doesn't work. Okay, that's a side. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Now, going back to what we said about Rava. Rava had said that, that this whole halacha of kli b'toch kli doesn't work because of the machatim, right? Because of these needles that you put in a kli with a very narrow opening that's not wider than this straw, okay? Comes the Gemara and says, Hani Mile, they're now going to limit Rava's halacha. Bikli tahol. Now, not the gzera. The whole thing is gzera. You can't do any kli inside a kli, just in case what happens, you think that you could do the needles inside this narrow open kli. But the whole thing with the narrow opening in the kli is only an issue if the outer kli is tahol, is pure. And you have these needles that are impure, and you want to dunk, you put them in the mikvah in the jug, let's say that it's in, okay? Then it's a problem. Aval b'kli tameh. But if the outer vessel is impure, migo de salka tvila lekule gufa demana salka luname lekelim deipe. And you take this kli. We're now going to change what we thought really, which is if the outer vessel is impure as well, and you put it in the mikvah, anything inside it becomes pure because it's already working the mikvah waters to purify the vessel. It's going to purify everything inside the vessel. So that's a narrowing, a limiting of Rava's halacha. So again, migo de salka tefila lekuli go for demana, since it works for the entire vessel, salkalu, it's going to work also lekelim deipe, for the vessels that are inside it. How do we know this? We're going to learn it from a Mishnah. It's not just Stam the Gemara saying this. Ditnan, it says in the Mishnah, kelim shemil'an kelim bihit bilan. If you filled up kelim with other kelim, hare elu tehorin, it works. Now, we don't really know yet what situation this is, but from the last part, we're going to understand. First, we're going to read this line. It's not going to make any sense. And the Gemara is also going to say, what is this talking about? So don't worry that you don't understand it yet. V'im lo taval, but if you didn't put them in the mikvah, mayim ha'ma'uravim ad shu mu'uravim k'shoferet hano. The water is mixed until it's mixed as long as they're mixed with an opening of a shoferet hanod, of this, right, this reed, straw. So Maika Amal V'im Lo Taval, what does this mean? Hachi Kamer. V'im Eino Tzarich Lahadbilo Mayim HaMuravim Ad Shemuravim K'Shoferet Hanod. Im Lo Taval doesn't mean if you didn't put them in the mikveh. The whole situation is we're putting them in the mikveh. Im Lo Taval means if it doesn't need putting in the mikveh, then it's only going to work if the water can get into the inner kli with the width of the shoferet hanod, this tube. But so now go back to the beginning. When it said, right, we're distinguishing between it doesn't need toveling to it needs toveling. What do you mean it needs toveling? It's impure. So now go back to the first line. The first line was, kelim shemilan kelim behit bilan. Now this must be talking about vessels that are impure, meaning the outer one as well. If the outer one is impure and you had a vessel inside it, hare elu toholim, it works. So there you proved exactly what we just said about limiting Rava, that it's only when the outer one is tahor that we're going to have a problem, that you need the width of shoferet hanod. But if the outer one is tameh, once it's working, so to speak, the mikveh waters are working to purify it, it's going to purify that and anything inside it. Okay, so that's an aside again. Now we're back to Ha de Rava de Rabbi Eli Tenahi. They're now going to say it's actually a machloket tanaim, this debate. Is kli b'toch kli an issue of chatzitza, or is kli b'toch kli a gzeira because of the shoferet hanod? Titania has, now, what did we say before? The nafkamina, which is a word that means the difference, the practical difference halachically between the two, is what? The salva garguni. According to Rava, the salva garguni is going to be fine because it's so different from a very narrow opening. Whereas according to Rabbi Eli, it's going to be a problem because it's still an issue that one is on top of the other and it might be a chatzitza. So let's see. Titania, it says in a Braita. So we want to prove that there's a machloka between two different Tanaim about this topic. Salva gargutne shemil an kelim v'hitbilan. So now we're talking about these big, wide vessels that you filled up with other vessels and you put them in the mikvah. Bein lekodesh, bein letruma tehorim. This is Rava. Doesn't matter. It's always going to be tahor. There's no problem. Remember, our Mishnah that we were trying to explain is about kodesh. It's a problem, not for truma, right? It's a problem for kodesh, though. This says it's not a problem at all. So it must be an exception to the rule, and that would only fit according to Rava. Abba Shaul omer litruma avalo lekodesh. He says, no. It's allowed for truma, not kodesh. That seems like the simple reading of our Mishnah, which you then have to say would be Rabbi Ela, who thinks that the issue is chatzitza, right? Because there's still a problem. So now comes the really big question, which is why this distinction between truma and kodesh? Doesn't seem to make sense, right? Ihachi, if you're worried about a chatzitza, okay, this is really a question really on both of them, but if we're really talking about a chatzitza, it's a problem. Ihachi truma nami. It should be a problem for truma as well. In other words, either it's a problem or it's not a problem. So if it's a problem for truma, it's a problem for kodesh. If it's not a problem for either. So the Gemara answers, and we're going to have a ping pong because each time they're going to say, oh, it's not a problem for truma because of this. And then they're going to say, well, if it's not a problem for truma, it shouldn't be a problem for kodesh. And they're going to say, oh, it's a problem for kodesh because of this. And then they're going to say, well, if it's a problem for kodesh because of this, why is it not a problem for truma? It's going to be our ping pong. So now they say, ihachi truma nami. So they say, right, if that's the case, it should be a problem for truma. So what's the answer? Leman ka'amrinan. Who is this for? Okay, meaning, what's this halacha for? Now, the world divides into, in their world, chaverim and amei haaretz. This is going to be the premise for what we're going to learn for the next section. This also has a lot to do with what we call kfiyah datit, like forcing people to keep the religion in the way that you believe religion is, right? This is really the big issue here. There's people who are chaverim. They're very careful about tum and tara, right? To the extent that some of them even treat their chulin as if it's kodesh and treat their chulin like it's truma. And right? They're very, very careful, even if you're not that strict. But they're very careful. Amei haaretz, the rabbis believe that they weren't very careful about tum and tara. And we're going to see later that these are people who are not detail-oriented. Now, to keep halachot, certainly certain types of halachot, you have to be super detail-oriented and interested in being detail-oriented. If you're not interested in being detail-oriented, you're not going to be, right? You're not going to, there's people who keep halacha in a general sense and not in the details. So if you have interactions and you're going to share things with let's say, I'm a chavera, and I keep the halachot, and you're going to share things with me, I'm going to have issues sometimes, because you're going to bring me something, and I'm going to say, well, and not only am I going to be worried, maybe it's tameh, but the rabbis made a gzerah. They said, anything you get from an Am Haaretz, assume it's tameh. Okay, that's a very interesting gzerah. We're going to see something even more interesting about it later. But the rabbi said we have to treat everything as if it's tameh. So therefore, what did they say here? Why is this not a problem for truma? Because a kli b'toch kli, leman ka'amrinan chaverim mediyadeh. The whole halacha of truma in general, all of this just relates to chaverim. And we'll see why in a minute, right? Why is that? Because if Am Haaretz are worried about we're worried that Am Haaretz don't keep Hilchot Tumah and Tara properly. So if an Am Haaretz brings me truma, I can't take it from him. Okay, I have to say thank you, but no thank you, because I have to assume it's impure. Truma that's impure, you can't eat. So he says like this: the truma, there's no interaction between an Am Haaretz and a chaver when it comes to truma, because I won't accept truma from him. Therefore, this halach is just for chaverim. If it's just for chaverim, if I'm dunking my kli within a kli, right? Imagine you go to the mikveh to tovel kelim. Okay, you can imagine the situation. I go to the mikveh, I put my stuff in the mikveh, and I put a kli inside a kli, and I know that the water has to get around, so I make sure that the water gets everywhere, and then I don't have a problem. So therefore, right, let's assume we're talking about chatzitza, or even if you're talking about shvoferet hanod, I know the laws of shvoferet hanod, so I'll make sure we don't have to worry for someone like me. So therefore, chaverim medeyadeh, they know these halachot, you don't have to worry about. To which the Gemara says, okay, well, ping pong back. If we're only talking about chaverim, so ihachi kodesh nami, right? Then shouldn't be a problem for kodesh. If I can't accept truma from an Am Haaretz, of course I can't accept kodesh from them, because right, sanctified items are even more strict. Well, they say no. Chazir Am Haaretz v'azil matbil. Say, what's the issue? The issue with kodesh is an Am Haaretz might see me doing it, and they'll think that they can tovel a kli and a kli. They won't know that I'm being very careful about making sure the water gets around entirely around the vessel. They'll do it, and they'll do it wrong, and then they'll have a vessel that's not properly toveled. To which the Gemara says, okay, I'm missing something here, right? If we're not worried about Am Haaretz for truma, why are we worried about them kodesh, right? So truma nami, chazir Am Haaretz v'azil matbil. That's again, why aren't we worried about truma that the Am? And we said already, we're not really worried about the Am Haaretz because we're worried only about chaverim. We're not really worried about Am Haaretz. So what do I care if the Am Haaretz sees and makes a mistake? The Am Haaretz doesn't care about details of Tumah and Tara. So it's a very interesting theory. It's almost like, well, we don't really care if they make a mistake because they're not careful about this in general anyway. So the answer is, right, what are we really careful about? We're not so worried about them because they're not going to keep halacha anyway, the way we think halacha is, the rabbis are saying. However, we're worried about the interaction between us and them. So truma, we're not worried about because lo mekablina minayu. This is what I said before. We won't accept truma from them. So that's why we're not worried about their truma. If they take vessels for truma purposes and they dip them in the mikveh, one inside the other, and there happens to be a separation, and they didn't do it properly, and then they bring me the truma in that vessel, for me, that truma, right, that's impure. But it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to take the truma from them anyway, because I always assume their vessels are impure. So then, obviously, the Gemara is going to go back to kodesh, so I still don't get it. Kodesh nami lo nekabel minei. We're not going to accept kodesh from them either, so why do we care if when it comes to a vessel that's holding a sacrificial item, I'm worried that they're going to look and they're going to see how I dunk it, and they're going to do it in the same way, and they're going to come to a mistaken conclusion and then bring me my kodesh disqualified in that vessel? So the answer, and this is the fascinating answer, havyale eva. We're worried about creating a situation of hatred between us. If I won't accept their kodesh, then they're going to hate me. Okay, so now, right, and this is, right, we know about all the tension between religious, secular, right? This is exactly here. They're going to get very angry at me. So obviously the Gemara is going to ask, wait a minute, I can't accept their truma, and that's not going to create hatred, animosity between us, but I can't accept their kodesh, right? Something seems weird. Truma nami, havyale eva. So they say, fascinating, lo ichpatle, de'azil yavle l'koin am haaretz chavre. When is it going to create animosity? If I cause them a big loss, okay, or a problematic situation. If I won't accept their truma, it's really not a big deal. There's a lot of kohanim who are amei haaretz who aren't careful about tumah and tara like they are, they'll find someone like them who will accept it. And there's enough Kohanim out there who aren't so careful about halacha, who will be happy to take their truma, right? It's a gift, it's food, right? They'll be happy to accept it. But, right, so now they're going to say, what's the issue? They don't exactly spell this out. And now you have to think about what's the difference with Kodesh. So first of all, Kodesh, there aren't alternative options. Everything goes to the temple. There's only one temple, right? And it's almost like the temple is the place that unifies us all. And we're going to create division in the temple. Oh, we can't accept yours. We can't accept yours. So therefore, this whole issue, and now it becomes, right, Kodesh we're more stringent about, but when it comes to an Am Haaretz, we trust him more when it comes to Kodesh. Because the Am Haaretz knows that if he wants to bring his items to the temple, he only has one way to go. He's got to keep, right? It's like a two-way thing. Number one, he knows that we're only going to accept it if he takes care of it. And number two, if we don't accept it, it's going to create this animosity between us because this is the temple where we all come together. And if we start saying, no, you can't bring your stuff in, it's going to be very problematic. So because of that, there's this difference between Kodesh and Truma. And that's why, going back, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. I can't tovel a kli within a kli for Kodesh, but I can for Truma, because Truma, it's only me and Chaverim that I'm dealing with. And we all know that we have to be careful about it. In Kodesh, we're worried that an Am Haaretz will learn and think. And as the Am Haaretz, we assume he wants to keep the halacha. So what does he do? He looks at how a Chaver tovels it. He sees that a Chaver tovels a kli within a kli. He says, oh, I guess I could do that. But he doesn't understand that he has to make sure all the water gets in, and he might end up with a tamei kli, and we don't want that to happen. So therefore, we allow, that's why we're stringent when it comes to Kodesh, so that the Am Haaretz doesn't watch us. So now a very small question, and then we'll get to a much more complicated one. First, they say, Man tana d'chayesh leva. Who's the one who came up with this idea, or who holds that we have to worry about this animosity between us? Rabbi Yossi, it's Rabbi Yossi. Ditanya, ma Rabbi Yossi. We're going to deal with this much more on Kaf Daled. When it comes to wine or oil that's going to the temple, that's sanctified for the temple, okay, as opposed to Truma, the Amei Haaretz, we're obviously careful about those laws. In other words, even though we say generally we don't trust them, we trust them about those things all year long, as opposed to, we're going to see that when it comes to Truma, they're only trustworthy in the time that everyone's working in the wine press and in the olive press, because that time of year, they're careful because they know no one's going to buy it if they're not very careful about it. Okay, so, but when it comes to Kodesh, they're all year long. Here we get to another reason about this. We don't want everyone to start, if we don't accept their stuff in the temple, it's going to create separation in the Jewish people as a whole. They're going to start making their own altars somewhere else. So they're going to find a red heifer and burn it themselves and do their own, right? Create their own system of law. We don't want that to happen. And therefore, we trust them when it comes to things that are unifying things, like temple, as opposed to Truma, which just goes to an individual Kohen. They can always find a different Kohen to give it to. Amara Papa, this is an aside now. Why do we allow testimony from an Am Haaretz in court? Keman ki Rabbi Yossi. Again, this goes by Rabbi Yossi, who basically says, right, this is again a centralized thing. We have to be able to accept them in court as well, even though they might not keep halacha the same way we do. Okay, very interesting sugya. Okay, but we have very complicated daf, so we're going to move on. Nichush l'sheila. Here's the hard part. Okay, now they say, maybe you should be concerned for borrowing. In other words, maybe it's true I won't accept truma from them, okay, but maybe I'll borrow their utensils, right? And now if they tell me, well, I toveled it properly, okay, and then I'm going to be like, how do I know if to trust them, not to trust them? And we're going to see exactly what we're saying here, but what the question is, and we'll see all the details as we get on. But first, we're going to show that Chaverim did borrow utensils from Amei Haaretz, and we're going to see it from a machloka between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Titnan, as it says in the Mishnah. And then the issue is like this. If we allow, okay, again, what's the question here? If we allow kli b'toch kli for truma, in Amei Haaretz might see me doing it, they'll tovel it that way, and then they'll come and tell me, listen, I toveled my kli properly, when really they didn't, okay? That's the question. Why aren't we worried about that? So we're only going to get back to this question in a little while, so put the question aside. I'll remind you when we get back to it. Right now, we want to prove that Chaverim did borrow utensils from Amei Haaretz. Ditnan. Okay, now we're moving into laws of Tumat Maid. Okay, a dead body in a house. Okay, first of all, flashback this week of Shuli Mishkan is all about some background laws of Tum and Tara in general, and some historical things that people found and that corroborate certain things. And it's very interesting. I definitely could read. Okay. What is this? We have a dead body in the house. Okay. Soon we'll learn if I have someone upstairs and there's a hole in the ceiling. Okay. There's 2 floors. There's a hole in the ceiling, which is the floor of the upstairs. And if it's not closed up, then the tuma, tuma mate in the house, everything on this level. And if there's a hole to the upstairs level, it will also go upstairs as well. If I have an earthenware vessel, this unique halacha, if it's sealed, samid patil it's called, if it's sealed shut, everything inside is saved from impurity, protected by the outside of the vessel. So that's what it means, klicheres matzil al hakol, divrei Beit Hillel. It protects anything inside, according to Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai omrim, eino matzil ela al ochalin v'al hamashkim v'al klicheres. The only items it can protect, according to Beit Shammai, is if you have food, drink, and another earthenware utensil inside it. But if you have metal, wood, something else that's susceptible to impurity, that will become impure as well, which we don't really understand yet why. And why, number one, why that will be impure. Number two, why he makes this distinction between food and drink and earthenware utensils versus other things. So neither does Beit Hillel. Amru lahem Beit Hillel Beit Shammai mipnei ma. For what reason? Amru Beit Shammai mipnei shehu tamei agav ama aretz. Okay, we must be talking about an ama aretz here. In ama aretz, any of his vessels are impure. So this kli cheres that we are claiming is going to protect what's inside is actually impure itself. Now there's a law. If you have an impure vessel, what this is doing basically is it's chotzetz. It creates a separation, right? The tum is in the air, let's say, right? We now have a vessel. The vessel protects the airspace inside because it's sealed shut. And anything inside doesn't get to the air of the dead body, so to speak. This is the way we can understand it, right? Airspace. Comes, and that's what's called chotzetz b'fnei hatuma. There's a separation, there's a barrier, there's a kli that blocks the tumah from going inside. However, if it's tameh, the kli outside, there's a rule, ein kli tameh chotzetz. Okay, a kli, a vessel that's impure cannot block tumah from going. Remember I told you that the upstairs, if it's shut and there's a ceiling, that will block tumah from going upstairs. Okay, let's say the dead body's on the first floor, that will block. Let's say there's a hole, there's a big window between, right, a hole in the ceiling that goes up to the second floor. Maybe, right, there's a ladder that goes up and that's how we get there and there's an opening. If I seal it, let's say with an earthenware vessel, a shard that's impure, the tumah will go straight through, okay? Even though, right, if we view it as air, well, it can't get through air-wise, but we don't view it as air. It goes by, if the object can separate, then it works. But if the object is impure itself, it doesn't separate. So we're talking about an ama aretz's house. And since the vessel itself is impure, the tumah goes right through it. That's why what's inside becomes impure. To which there's an obvious question, which is, okay, so Amru lahem Beit Hillel, v'lo tihartem ocholinu mashkin shebetocho, but you made this split. You said it makes certain things impure and other things not impure. The food, the drink, and the earthenware vessel inside is pure. So if you're saying what you're saying, you're missing something, right? Doesn't make any sense why some would be impure, some wouldn't be. It sounds like everything should be impure. To which Amru lahem Beit Shammai, kishiti, here's the big complicated line, kishiti harnu ochalinu mashkin shebetocho la'atzmoti harnu. When we said the food and drink and earthenware vessel that's inside, that was for the ama aretz himself. And now we get to this fascinating thing. The halacha basically says, if you're an ama aretz and you don't care about tum and tara, well, then your food and drink isn't tameh. Okay? Because why? Well, because we know you're not going to listen to us anyway. In other words, you don't care. What's the whole idea? The whole idea is the kli is tameh because the rabbi said any vessel of an ama aretz is tameh. And therefore, the impurity goes through. But it's only going to go through to things that are for the ama aretz exclusively. Because, okay, now it's a little bit weird what the halacha says. Since you don't keep halacha, it's not going to be a problem. It's very strange. So I read a good answer, which was that the rabbis, and this is a fascinating answer, the rabbis said that the gazru, right? They made an ordinance that all kelim of amei aretz we're not going to trust. But that was made for chaverim. But for amei aretz themselves, they didn't make that gezerah. Right? If I'm an ama aretz and I don't keep halacha, the rabbis didn't say to assume all your vessels are impure. No, you know what's impure, what's not impure, and keep it the way you keep it. Right? Maybe they are pure. They're only impure for chaverim. Chaverim have to watch out for them. But this isn't something the Amei Haaretz can keep to, right? Then everything of theirs is always tamei. So the gezerah didn't apply to them, which is a fascinating idea that a gezerat or rabbanan would apply to some people in the community, not other people. It's very, very strange or interesting also, right? In any case, the point here, what's the distinction between food and drink and klei cheres? What's unique about them? If food becomes tamei, you can't purify it. If drink becomes tamei, you can't purify it. If an earthenware vessel becomes tamei, you can't purify it. None of those can be purified, which means that if I'm a chaver, I will never touch those items because there's nothing I could do to fix them. But comes Beit Shammai and he says, that's why the food and drink and the klei cheres, because those will never get into the hands of a chaver, okay? They're just in the realm of the Amei Haaretz, so that's fine. The Amei Haaretz does what he wants and he can eat them. But a vessel, we're not going to say the vessel is pure when it might end up in the hands of a chaver. Okay, that means lechavelo, to him and to someone else. So, right, to me and to him. Meaning, what does this prove? This proves Beit Shammai's halacha is based on the fact that chaverim borrowed kelim from Amei Haaretz. So therefore, we're going to say if it was in a house of a dead body, and since we treat the outer kli as tamei, whatever's inside is tamei as well, because right, the kli doesn't block a tamei kli, an impure vessel doesn't block tumah from going inside. So before we get back to our original question, our whole question was, well, if they borrow kelim, then what's the problem? Well, if they look at us doing kli b'toch kli, right, then they might learn the wrong thing, even for truma, and it should be a problem because they'll say, look, I toveled this, and they'll lend it to me, and they'll say it's pure, and how can it be that I'll end up using it when it's really not pure? But anyway, we're going to get back to that soon. In the meantime, Tanya, there's a braita about this. The Rabbi Yeshua responds very harshly to Beit Shammai, and he says, I'm embarrassed by what you just said. And he says, this is an absurd halacha, because he's going to take it one step farther. And here's why I gave you the house and the roof, the attic. We're talking now about a house and an attic with a hole. Okay, there's like a window in the ground, okay, or in the ceiling, whichever perspective you're coming from. And it's filled with an earthenware vessel that's impure. So now, what will we say? He says, Efshar isha lasha ba'areva. There's a woman upstairs. There's a dead body downstairs. There's a woman upstairs kneading her dough in a bowl. Areva is a bowl, a kneading bowl. Isha. Now, what would you say? So, isha va'areva tme'in shiva. Okay, the tumah goes up. So she's tme'ah for 7 days. The bowl is tameh for 7 days. But what are you going to say now? Ubatsek tahol. You're going to say what's inside the bowl. Okay, let's assume the bowl was closed. Because it's food, you're going to say it's pure. That's an absurdity. The woman becomes tameh, the bowl becomes tameh. What's inside it is tahor. And likewise, logi, maleh mashkin, you have a pitcher, a metal pitcher, right? Not an earthenware, a metal one. Ve maleh mashkin, it's full of liquid. Login tameh tumat shiva, you're going to say, this becomes tameh for 7 days, because anything that comes in contact with dead is tameh for 7 days. And mashkin are going to be torim, and what's inside it is tahor. That's crazy. So what you're saying is totally absurd. So, Nitpalo Talmid Chami Talmidei Beit Shammai, he teaches him a lesson. Okay, a student from Beit Shammai comes along and he says, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to explain to you. He says, Amar lo, Omar lecha ta'aman shel Beit Shammai. Do you want to hear what Beit Shammai's reason is? I'll explain it to you. Amar lo emol. He says, yeah, please tell me. Amar lo, he says, it's very obvious. Kli tameh chotzetz o eino chotzetz. Now, here's the student's very smart. He starts simple and he starts with asking him questions. He says, okay, so tell me, Rabbi Yoshua. Kli tameh, if it's an impure vessel, does it block tumah or does it not block tumah? Amar lo, eno chotzetz. It doesn't block tumah. Kli shalama aretz, tameh o tahor, a vessel of an Amei Haaretz, is it pure or impure? Amar lo, tameh. He says it's impure. So now basically what he's saying is, right, it really is tameh. The outer kli is tameh and the inner stuff is also tameh. But why does Beit Shammai say the food and drink is okay? Because im ata omer lo tameh, klu mashgiach alecha. This is the fascinating line, right? If you go to that Amei Haaretz and you say, by the way, your food is tameh, is he going to listen to you? No, because he doesn't think his vessels are impure. And velo od ella, but more than that, she'im ata omer lo tameh. If you tell him, okay, right, classic, you can imagine this interaction, religious and secular Jew, right? The religious Jew says to him, tameh, your vessel is tameh. Omar lecha, he'll say to me, you, Sheli tahor v'shalcha tameh, mine is pure, your vessel is impure. In other words, who are you to tell me about the status of my vessels? So basically, he explains to him what we already knew. It's just we get into this conversation, which is the reason why is because it's relating to the Am Haaretz exclusively. Okay? And therefore, you can't tell him what to do because he's not going to listen to you. That's his reason. Miyad halach Rabbi Yeshua. What was his reaction now? After he said, I'm embarrassed by what you said, Beit Shammai. And now he says, oh, really makes sense. So what did he do? Halach v'nishtateach, halach Rabbi Yeshua v'nishtateach al kivrei Beit Shammai. He went to the grave of Beit Shammai. Amarna aneti lachem atzmo Beit Shammai. Please, right? It's actually interesting. Beit Shammai is not a person. I don't know what it means exactly, Beit Shammai. Maybe the students were all buried in a certain plot or area. I don't know. But he goes to the kever of Beit Shammai and he says, listen, bones of Beit Shammai, please, maybe it really means Shammai, even though it doesn't say that, but please forgive me. When you don't explain things properly, look how clear they are. When you do explain things properly, right, how much more correct they must be. And Amru kol yamav hushkaru shinav mipnei taniotav. They say all of his days, his teeth turned black because he fasted all the time. Okay, he spent the rest of his life atoning for this terrible sin. It's interesting because the walls of his house were black also, Rabbi Yeshua, right? It's funny. Okay, so back to our question. Okay, we got very sidetracked. But katanimia lecha velo alma sha'alina minayu. What do you see here? People did borrow vessels because the whole thing was the vessels inside that are metal in this closed kli cheres are going to be impure, specifically the chaverim. What do they have to do with chaverim? They must lend them to chaverim. So they do lend, which means, right, why with the truma are we not worried of kli b'toch kli? So now they say, ki shaylina minayu matbilina lehu. Because in our situation, kli b'toch kli, if I borrow a kli and the guy tells me, listen, I toveled the kli b'toch kli and I know it's fine, or I toveled it and I know it's fine and I didn't know it was kli b'toch kli, it doesn't really matter. Because if I borrow a kli from an Am Haaretz, I'm going to go straight to the mikveh anyway, just to make sure that it's okay. So it doesn't matter. Well, now we have a bigger problem. Okay, we're back to this ping pong. He could say to Beit Shammai, you don't need to make metal vessels inside that earthenware vessel impure, because if an Am Haaretz, if a chaver borrows it, they'll go to the mikveh the next day and tovel it. So I don't understand. They say, no, you forgot what we're talking about. These are two very different cases. Kli b'toch kli is a regular kli that's ready for toveling in the mikveh. This thing that's inside an earthenware vessel in a house where there's a dead body doesn't just need to tovel in a mikveh. It needs you need to wait 7 days. You sprinkle it with the paraduma waters. It's like a person. On the third day, you have to sprinkle it again on day number 7 and then take it to the mikveh. That's why the Am Haaretz has to be careful about this, because if he wants to be able to loan his stuff to a chaver, the chaver is never going to take it because maybe he'll have to wait 7 days to use it. So that's what they say here. Tmei made by haza'at shlosha v'shiv'ah, umana l'shiv'ah lo moshli inashe, right? They're not going to know to count the 3 and the 7. So that's why when it's kli b'toch kli, we are concerned. We're not, right? We're going to allow a kli b'toch kli for truma, even though we're not concerned, because even though a chaver might borrow the kli, the chaver is going to go next, right? As soon as they get it, they'll go straight to the mikveh and then use the borrowed utensil. But if it's a tamei mate issue like this other case, they're very different situations. There, the chaver would have to know that it needs to wait 7 days and sprinkle it and all that. First of all, you're not going to really want to borrow something. You're going to need it right then. So that's why we say to the Am Haaretz, this is impure. And if you want to be able to loan your stuff to a chaver, you have to keep these laws, because otherwise nobody will borrow. Okay, a lot of interesting things to say here about interactions between Am Haaretz and chaverim, but again, we don't have enough time, so we're going to move on. Now wait, are they not trustworthy? Aren't they trustworthy about dunking things in the mikveh? Again, if they say, I dunked it properly, aren't they trustworthy? V'hatanya, doesn't it say in a braita? Ne'emanim amei haaretz al taharat tfilat meimet. They're trustworthy when it comes to the dunking of a tamei mate. So Amar Abaye lo kasha, we're going to have 2 answers. Haba gufo, haba kelav. We can distinguish between his body and his utensils. Okay? His body, people are careful about, not necessarily their vessels. Rava Amar, idid bekelav. No, you could say both are talking about his utensils. Below kasha, had Amar, and we're going to distinguish 2 cases. Again, tamei mate and kli b'toch kli. Or not that. Sorry. We're going to distinguish between what he says. And this goes back to, again, what we assume in Am Haaretz is trustworthy about and what we assume is not. Had Amar me'olam lo hitbalti kli b'toch kli. If the Amma Aretz tells you, I never dunked a kli in another kli. Whenever I toveled my stuff in the mikveh, it was always just one kli. If he tells you that, or she tells you that, you can totally believe them. That's not what we were worried about in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, we were worried about Hada Amar Hitbalti, Aval Lo Hitbalti B'kli She'ein B'piv K'shvoferet Hanod. If he says I dunked it, but I always made sure that there was a wide enough opening of Shvoferet Hanod, that straw, you can't trust him on that, because that's something that you have to be halachically minded to details in halacha to be able to be conscious of that. And Amei Haaretz are not careful about those things. So we don't trust something like that, okay? But we do trust general, which is an interesting thing in and of itself. And here's a proof of this. Ba'atanya, it says in a Braita, Ne'eman ha'aretz lomal, perot lo huchshiru, another thing we believe in. And this is the same concept. If I say, I'm an Amma Aretz, and I say, listen, here's some fruits. I know that they never came in contact with water, which means, or any liquid, any of the 7 liquids that create susceptibility to impurity, which means it's not susceptible to impurity, which means it's definitely pure. Then you can trust me on it. But if I say, I can't say, I'm not trusted if I said, listen, water got on them, but I know that nobody tamei ever touched them. We know that Amei Haaretz are not careful about that. They don't ask people. They're not checking who's tamei, who's not. They have no real idea. They're not careful about that. So there's these lines we draw about what we trust them and what we don't trust them. Agufo me meheman, is he really believed about his body? That was the first answer Abaye said. It's the difference between his body and his vessels. Ba'atanya, it says in a Braita, chaver shabala hazot mazim alav miyad. If someone comes and says, listen, I became impure to a dead body, I'm on my day number 3, I'm ready to be sprinkled on. We'd sprinkle him right away on day number 3. This is like corona test, right? You claim you were sick 3 days ago, but you only took your corona test today. So the law starts by when you took your test. So when that person comes to us and says, listen, I'm ready to be sprinkled, you say, fine, you're going to wait from today. On day number 3, I'll sprinkle you. Okay? So you see, he's not trusted. He says very interesting. He says, listen, that Amma Aretz came to you and said, I'm impure. You made him wait to day number 3. He saw how serious this is because you made him wait to day number 3 till you sprinkled him. Because of that, we can assume in the end that he's going to tovel properly. In other words, because we add these chumrot, that's going to mean he's going to treat it seriously and we can be more lenient with him on the end part. Okay. And therefore we can assume if he says I tovel, that he did tovel. Okay. Now we get to a much easier part of the daf, which is the achorayim betoch. We're now at the next case in the Mishnah, which is the outer part. Remember, if you touch the outer part and it's truma, right, a liquid comes upon it and you want to, we're talking about impurity for truma purposes, what's inside doesn't become impure, right? Or the handle, right? It's just each part has its own impurity. When it comes to Kodesh, everything becomes impure, even if it gets touched by something. So kiditnan, as it says in the, so maya choraim betoch, what does this mean? What are these parts? We're just defining. As it says in the Mishnah, kiditnan, kli shenitma achorav b'mashkin. Now mashkin is this Rabbanit that we've talked about a bunch of times. Normally a kli doesn't become impure by food or drink, but in liquids, we're stringent because of the liquid of the zav and all that, the rok that we talked about, the saliva and stuff. It has a high status of abatuma. Because of that, we're strict with mashkin in general. If liquid touches the outside of the kli, achorav tmeim, only the outside becomes impure. Tocho, the inner part, the ogno, the rim, the ozno, the handle, and the yadav. There's 2 kinds of handles. Ozen is like an ear. It's a rounded handle and a straight handle, right? Like in a pot, you sometimes have a straight handle. You sometimes have a rounded one. So those are 2 different kinds. Tehorim. Okay, the rest of it's going to be tahor. But nitma tocho kulo tameh. If the inside becomes impure, then everything becomes impure. So that's just to define what these different parts are. Ubeitat svita. What's the beitat svita that was mentioned? Svita litzvot means to pinch. What is that? And there's no pincher on a utensil. My beitat svita. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Makom shetzovto, the part where you pinch it, meaning the handle. V'cheinu omer, they prove from pasuk in root by yitzbat bakeli. He pinched the parched corn. Okay, so there you see it's pinching. Rabbi Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan makom shenikiyei hadat sovin. Not from tzvita, from tzvi'ah. What is tzvi'ah? Not coloring, but it means that people dip. There were these vessels. There's a nice picture in the Koran where they had a little thing on the side that had a little receptacle in it, and people would put vinegar or mustard to dip their things into. That's what we mean, not the handle, but that little part on the side. So again, that little part is its own receptacle. It's considered its own utensil for these purposes. Tani Rabbi Kamed Rav Nachman, he brought a brayta that said, Kol hakelim ein lehem achoraim betoch, echad kodshei hamikdash ve'echad kodshei hagvul. Both when it comes to Kodesh and both when it comes to outside the temple, they all have the same laws, meaning if the outer part gets impure, the whole thing is impure. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says to him, Amalei kodshei hagvul ma'inenu. What is kodshei hagvul? Is it not truma, right? What do you eat outside the temple? You eat truma. V'hatznan, didn't it say achoraim betochu beit hatzvita l'truma? That there are laws, they are separate. They're not, the whole thing doesn't become impure. So they say, Dilma l'chulin shenasu al ta'arat hakodesh kamar. You must be talking about bigvulin is the people outside the temple who treat their chulin as if it's kodesh. And in fact, ad kartam milta, you reminded me of exactly what we said. Da'amal, we saw this yesterday. Amar Rabbi Ravua, achat esrei ma'alot shenukan. There's 11 cases in the Mishnah. Shesh harishonot, bein l'kodesh, bein l'chulin shenasu al ta'arat hakodesh. Whatever laws are in the first 6, which included this achoraim betoch, is not only true for kodesh, also true for people who treat chulin as if they're kodesh. So when it says bein b'mikdash, bein b'gvul, b'gvul means people who treat their chulin as if it was sacrificial items. Achronot, the second 5, l'kodesh avalo l'chulin shenasu al ta'arat kodesh. That it's not applicable for. Anyway, that's how we just prove what this brayta meant. We'll stop here for today and pick up on the new case, next case in the Mishnah tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. And reminder, there's no Zoom tomorrow. The Shiur will go up as usual in the morning, as will Shabbat stuff. And we'll meet back together next week. And don't forget to check registration later today and register for the Siyum.